Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is the show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Last episode, for all of you that had the low voice jokes, props to you. Found out that my mic was acting weird. I thought I had fixed it. I thought all I needed to do was reboot my Audacity, but unfortunately, that's not the case. That's pretty much what happened. I found out I need to reboot my mic, as weird as that sounds. I have to unplug it and plug it back in so that it works properly. So there you go. So if I get some more issues, bear with me. I am in the process of trying to get all of this to work right. All right, so today's show is going to be an interesting show. You might be saying every show is an interesting show with you, Dark Logos. What's so special about today? And I would like to say thank you. Thank you for that direct, sweet comment that you had towards me. Today's show is I'm going to talk about something that I heard on the last episode of the Majestics podcast. And I thought it's worth dealing with because I think what Patrick brought up is legitimate, but I also don't think he understands how much he's part of the problem with this. So it goes like this. Patrick is talking about the teams from the last few competitions, and he's pretty much just saying, like, look, man, the archetypes of all these various different teams are the same. You might have different figures on there, but you're not seeing anything new. And I agree with him. I've been there as a commentator when I was doing the Quarry. And what I would come back and say is there are multiple reasons for this. And there's three major things that we have to look at. The first major thing is the player. Like, all honesty, is information in the player. And the second is information with the commentators or content producers, and third is WizKids. So I've already recorded this once. I came back, listened to it, and then I thought to myself, this isn't it wasn't up to my standards, so I'm re-recording this. So it goes like this. There is a massive amounts of information out there. And we are not AI. We only have so much time in the day. We can't just brute force hack tactics and try and simulate them over and over and over and over again versus ad infinitum amount of possibilities that's in this game to come up with the team that has the highest percentile chance of winning regardless of outcome. You just don't. We don't have the time. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that everything else that we deal with is based off of our limited amount of information. So you can go into what percentage, when you draw up that quadrant, your logic quadrant, and it goes your known knowns, your known unknowns, the unknown knowns and the unknown unknowns. It pretty much goes like that. So we operate a lot in the known knowns. So 1/4 of that logic, quadrant. We primarily operate there. We don't really deal with known unknowns. And the only time we really deal with known unknowns is what type of matches are we going to have. Because if we know what type of matches we are going to have, then of course, then we would just make the best team for the matches that we know we're going to have. But unfortunately, the other side would have that ability as well. So it creates a conundrum. It creates an infinite logic or time loop, is that if I know what I'm going to deal with, and then I beat my opponent, if my opponent has the same ability, they will then build something to beat me or beat up their series of matchups. That's pretty much it. And until that becomes true, you can't have a state where both opponents win the tournament simultaneously. Like it just won't happen. Okay. So, when we start talking about knowledge on the individual level, there's a great amount of things that are going on. And the only way that we're going to get diversity is dumbing people down. Like, realistically, we're hitting the heroclix technological singularity faster than we ever did before, thanks to Roll20. But I'll get to that in a little bit. So it goes like this. If you have a player and they listen to me, they listen to Patrick, and the Smetch Rats dude, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting your name, or whoever Patrick's current co-host is. I keep forgetting your name, homie. I just haven't talked to you in person. You listen to Aaron Cantu, Aries Edge on 2 Clicks. You listen to Click Stoff, listening to that team talk. Okay, great. You listen to Critical Clicks. You got my boy PJ Bolin in the house over there, and Scott Cram Company Crampton, my first heroclix idol. All right, so you got all those cats together. And anyone can listen to all of those things. You also can listen to Happy Little heroclix. You can listen to Married with Clicks. You can also listen to Mr. Clicks Fix. I mean, like, I could just go on and on and on and on and on with the amount of content that you can listen to help you become a better player in the game. Now, here is the issue. You can say, on a local meta perspective, the people that are paying attention to these shows dominate the people that aren't paying attention to these shows. Okay? And very few of them are going to be like, yeah, I listened to this really good podcast about heroclix. You should listen to it as well. And what I know from experience is that, A, the ones that do promote other podcasts to their non or not as competitive friends are told that they're sucking the fun out the game or whatever, and or two, the people that know the information aren't sharing the information. Very rarely you get someone that's like, oh, well, thank you, now I too am listening to great heroclix information to make myself better and learning in a fun way about things that I care about in life. So you have that up here as well. So you have the effect of local meta and national meta. And realistically, for most of us that are on the commentary end, we're mainly talking about like national, and if we want to be honest, semi-global meta. Okay, that's really what we talk about. And because we talk about these elements, our perspective is not just crush this local WKO. Our mindset is like, I'm going out of state to travel. I need to be able to bring something that has a more of a universal appeal and effectiveness. Now, if people locally are listening to that and have adapted to that, then there is one reality there, or there's something locally that's just dominating, so people have adapted to those elements. Then you have some degree of diversity. But if the mindset is of the better player, those players of those areas are to clone and copy the content producers, following that 80-20 rule to the umpteenth degree, then guess what? Whatever we paint as the picture as content producers in that 20% of the privileged upper class, we pretty much are dictating the realities of the lower 80%. Okay? I'm not trying to say that you're a heroclix peasant out there listening to this. But the 80-20 rule is in effect. As much as folks can say, like, Dark Logos, you suck, I'm part of the 20. Go make a podcast, you too could be part of the 20. Okay? But that's realistically it. And this is the only reason why I'm sort of harping on Patrick. Is because he's part of the 20. And so, unfortunately, you can't just tell people, look, man, you're not going to be listening to shows anymore. Like, you can't convince all of the content creators to go dark. That's not happening. I kid you not. That's not happening. Like, even if Patrick came up to me and he's like, bro, for the good of the future of the game, there can only be none. No more magicians. He comes up to me like freaking Mordo or something. Mordo. No, Mordo. Like at the end of Doctor Strange, just be like, we got to get rid of the podcast. We have to for the diversity and health of heroclix. I'd be like, heck no. I'd be like, hey, I might not be Doctor Strange. Hell, I might not even be Wong. I'd be one of those dudes that showed up at Endgame in the background with freaking spinning circle disc ready to whoop some butt. Like you might have been the best of us, but you aren't going to be the last of us. That's how I would have said it. But sort of going back, are you going to make it so that the local scene is dictated by the guy that got lucky or was rich enough to pull the best stuff? And the answer is no, we don't want that. Okay? So when we start looking at the diversity of the game and new mechanics, okay, guess it's automatically going to be, when we look at the base of it, we look at the proletariat, they're looking for information to be successful. And the ones that aren't looking for information to be successful, guess what? They're fine. They don't care about us. All right. So there you go. So we're not going to be able to make people be restricted to information so that we may be entertained. Okay. It's not going to work. All right. So that leads us to the next level, which is the content producers. And this is where I'm going to sort of go hard with the adult clubs in love. Okay? Are you going to stop PJ Bolin, Easton Brock, Daniel Powell, Aaron Cantu, Adam Friedman, and George Massue from talking to each other? Are you? And if you do, Patrick, you shut down your own business. And I say this in love, okay? Because realistically, you have the greatest minds in heroclix in one Facebook chat, talking and throwing out ideas. You got Paris Gordon in there, okay? So almost every person that's been a world champion is in your private Facebook chat, talking it up, writing stuff for articles, all that. And please, I don't want anybody to think that I'm casting shade on this. I'm not. But realistically, homie, like big homie, everybody's playing follow the leader, and you got the leaders in one stable. Like, dude, even talk about on your show how you will place bets against the field, against your writers. Like, knowing that it's really in your favor. Now, is it possible for your writers to lose? Yeah. But it's really weighted in your favor. The house always wins, man. And so, even if they have difference of preference, difference of opinion on stuff, it's only a matter of time before the osmosis appears. It's only a matter of time before George does something, PJ does something, the times that Dan leaves Cosmic. I kid. Do you get something like, oh, wow, hey, here's something new. And then the moment that something new appears, boom, the archetype is designed, and then it's emulated. It's made to be an inefficient monster at first, and then it morphs into another species eventually. Okay, but it'll come back to that root of the genesis of most intellectual ideas are presented by apex writer insiders. It just is. And so when you start talking about pushing the boundaries and the limits of this game, where's your challenge to your writers? Where is the challenge where even to the community by saying, look, money where my mouth is, $50 bounties, and you get to come on the show. Okay, but with the $50 bounties, you have to explain everything that went through behind you making your team. There has to be this many people at the event. Boom. There you go. $50 bounties. Make a team with no colossal retail. Has to be 20-man field. Win in the 20-man field. Make a team with no don't die. Give up less than 300 points all tournament. Boom. Hey, you can't use equipment at all. Boom. And here's the thing. I know to a degree it's possible because, Patrick, you talked about Beta Ray Bill and how good he is, and you big up people that use Beta Ray Bill in creative ways. Okay? And so, to a degree, to get some level of heroclix fame, people will go out there and play some Beta Ray Bill. Okay? And yes, he has his moments. Heck, I got pretty far in the WKO with them too. But I think there is a point in which we have to be honest. A lot of folks aren't thinking for themselves. And we're doing the thinking for them. Okay? Respectfully speaking. We're not the gods on Mount Olympus, but we're definitely kings of the kingdom. All right. And so when I look at, like, even if you were to make it functional, where you could say none of your writers could talk to each other, you could never enforce it. Because it's so much more beneficial, not only for their status, but just for their overall skill set, for them to play and work with one another. PJ will go practice with Dan or Easton. It only benefits those three. Going into any major event, it benefits them to do so. And why wouldn't they? Let's ask ourselves this. Why wouldn't any one of your Apex insiders not practice with another insider? Realistically. Like, I'm able to get people as clients because, hey, I'm up there on the national scene. I am competing. And people just want to compete against other folks that are on the national scene that's able to break down, like, hey, this is what you need to look at. This is what you need to do. If I'm able to draw in people as clientele, I mean, for that simple point, like, why wouldn't the best of the best be doing it among themselves? Unless there's some level of Bushido among them that says, I really want to definitively beat you, so I'm not going to talk to you. Or, I don't want to make you better because you're going to have to go against one of my teammates. Like, those are the only other logical reasons why they would say, you know what, I'll talk tech with you, but I won't practice with you. So, like, when we look at it, and we're asking ourselves, like, the hard questions about why aren't we seeing anything new? And I have to say it comes down to there is no incentive to do anything new until it is proven by the elites. It's just not. So, like I would say, homie, if you want to see something different, you have to come out there and give new guidelines, create new tech, present new ideas, go out there and prove them yourself like you used to do. Because otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen from the lower guys, and if it's not happening from your lower guys, it's not going to happen from your insiders. It's just not. If you tell one of them, hey, go through a tournament with no retail and no IDs, they'll be like, are you paying? Like, paying for my gas, paying for my travel, and paying me to be there. Because even with their skill level, it's going to be a rough road. So anyway, let's move on to that third part. Let's talk about WizKids, because WizKids is not infallible in this entire situation. Now, some of you might be saying, how is it WizKids' fault that Patrick is not seeing any diversitize? And it's simple. There is no evaluation of mechanics and enough pause in between relaunching the mechanic to evaluate if those mechanics are good for the game state. So let me give you a prime example. And the prime example is ID cards. ID cards were half-baked when they were introduced. They weren't fully... The spirit of them were there. I pretty much realized they were strikers in a fighting game. They weren't there to be permanent. They were there to be like, come in when you're playing King of Fighters. For all those who play King of Fighters, or if you're a Marvel vs. Capcom fan, like in the side pocket, Doom launches the missile barrage. Like, okay, like you called in the assist. Okay, that's what they are for. Okay, now there is no Marvel vs. Capcom fan or King of Fighters fan that will go through the entire game and spam assist. Okay, you can't win that way. But you can win that way with heroclix. And the fact of a game mechanic's main goal of making characters viable throughout the whole stretch of the match sort of shows you an ineptitude of design, that your characters aren't good throughout the whole time of the match. I'm just saying. Like, this is like the most blatantly obvious thing that we know is true, but we won't speak the words. Okay? So, designing such a mechanic isn't good. Now, I know I've had debates with teammates, and they're like, look, man, ID cards allow you to rally. ID cards let you use a diversity of your collection. It doesn't just lock a certain group of characters into the top. It allows for various characters to be top tier characters, or a lot of characters to be used various different ways, since they can utilize this mechanic. I have heard very good arguments by well-intentioned people. Okay, and even at points in times, I'm like, thumbs up for IDs. Okay, even if to the point where you were able to spend 5 points, break in case of emergency, this character can use this power. IDs, I'm down for it. Okay, but when we start looking at the mechanics of diversity in game design, there is very little incentive not to use that mechanic. There's not a problem with the mechanic being useful, but for a mechanic to be completely be without penalty, without counter, and without downside is a huge problem. And that's what ID cards have been for many years. Not only that, ID cards, and people are going to be like, this is an ID card rant. And it's like, it's not. Just follow the rabbit trail. It's going to lead back to the burrow. Okay. But the biggest problem with ID cards is the fact that low rarity characters can call upon higher rarity character values, thus inflating temporarily their value of that character's existence. Okay, if we're going to stick with the formula that lower rarity makes something more expensive to do, instead of, hey, lower rarity just makes something more common and you need to base your team off of, and higher rarity means less expensive for the same amount of points and whatnot. When you have a 60-point support piece call in a 60-point Chase Jean Grey, even if you burn 5 points and you add 5 points to that character's value, it's nowhere close. Even if they had the same power set, it's nowhere close. The stats are going to favor Jean. The trait is going to favor all the traits are going to favor Jean. Okay, the powers being the same means that the base common character sucks. Like he has a 9 attack, 2 damage, running shot, and willpower. And Jean's popping out there with a 10, 3 damage, running shot, TK, self, plus TK again, psychic blast, 8 range versus this base character's 6 range. Jean is killing it like a boss. Alright. So you're looking realistically to have huge disadvantages. Just huge disadvantages for that base character. But then, man, I had that ID card, and they summon in that ID card. Now they're hitting out of their point range. So there's a lot of that wasn't evaluated from a game state side. But from an economic side, it makes completely 100% sense on why ID cards are good. They're cheap. They're highly effective in making people buy sets. And more importantly, people interact more with the game and buy more game elements or buy more boosters when ID cards are in effect, so that they can utilize ID cards to be competitive. So from an economic perspective, I get it. But if we're talking about simply looking at it from balancing the game and looking at for a diversity of tactics where these things are optional and not mandatory, WizKids has done a completely horrible job of doing that. So, what ends up needing to happen from WizKid's perspective is that every mechanic needs to have a downside, and if it doesn't have a downside, it needs a cheap, accessible, way more efficient, and way more universal counter, or at least a deterrent. Okay? Prez Ricard is a great example of what can be done with game design and add something on your team without disrupting what your team does. Okay? You could easily say, like, hey, every tentpole, or let me phrase it, every counter silver bullet that we're going to create in the future just does not count for or against theme team. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, that changes things. Yeah, and those characters can still have keywords, and they can still be on theme teams, but for every silver bullet or every counter, it just does not count for or against theme team. And the moment that you do that, people will actually look at and invest in those figures. And I think that's huge. I think that's what's realistically mandatory, because the taking time off for game mechanics and evaluating them, WizKids just isn't going to do it. Like, I wanted them to evaluate Colossal Retail, because I believe what they did commercially for Colossals by introducing low point cost was more than sufficient. They didn't need to introduce more and more Colossal Retail. So I would make the argument we need more Ego Prime type characters where they're somewhat functional at low points. They still do the general gimmick. They're a little, light in the loafers. They can get knocked over real easily. But they still function. 100-point Tri-Sentinel. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think maybe you need to tweak the upfront cost so that I might want to play it more. Maybe make me have a little U dial or whatever else. I think introducing, the stop click to it may have been a bit much. But when all's said and done, okay, reevaluating the Colossal model was a good idea. But then making the colossal model dependent on uh, colossal retaliation is a mistake. I think that mechanic in and of itself should not be the focus of selling characters. I think that mechanic should be something like in addition to maybe a few handful of characters have, and they're useful, but they're not overpowering. If you're going to attack, you have lock stats. I think there like some of that may need to be in place in the future. Like you can't increase or decrease stats. Just like when you do a colossal retaliation for some characters, you can't increase the amount of damage that's dealt. It just says you deal 3 damage. You know, like you replace your damage value and you do 3 damage. It's like, okay, cool. So like for WizKid's perspective, I don't have a problem with them introducing a whole diversity of different mechanics. You know, insert your coalition here. Okay, like I said, the problem comes in is testing it and evaluating, because WizKids just doesn't do a good job at either of those. All right, so once things get out into the wild, usually the players do most of the testing and evaluating, and I know all my game designer friends and former friends and people I've talked to said you cannot predict what your player base is going to do with the product. And I agree, you can't. But when you give that first batch out and you're like, oh my gosh, they did this due to these rules and they made these suckers turn into, you know, flying windmills. Oh my gosh. Don Quixote is going to be slaying these all day. Okay. Like that, when that level of madness occurs, you just need to be like, okay, look, like this mechanic, where did we mess up? What is going on? Why was this mechanic so OP? Why does this mechanic become mandatory? Because, like, let's look at it. Which type of teams do not have colossal retail? A full uni, and don't die. And that's if it's a certain type of don't die. Okay? So those two teams primarily. Which teams don't use ID cards? Full uni. And I think that's it. Which teams don't use equipment? Maybe Wales. That's it. I think maybe Wales is the only one. Okay. So so you can automatically see, like, from a diversity standpoint, at least from an archetype, the archetypes are pretty much uniform. Now, I know some folks will say, I hate uni, he shouldn't exist. To a degree, I'm with you. I hate Unimind as well, with the power of 1,000 suns. At the same time, I recognize that he's necessary because he is a archetype in which classically it was viable in heroclix, and for over, I would say, 11-year span since I've been playing, that archetype hasn't been viable until full uni and also full Goblin King. But even with full Goblin King, I remember when people said that no one will ever play full Gobby. No one's that stupid to play full Gobby. And then comes Phil Isaacson, and he plays full Gobby and wins. Then all of a sudden, the freaking floodgates come open, and then people are like, full Gobby, it's the truth. Let me tell you about our Lord and Savior, Goblin King, and how he's come to not die for your sins, but to tell you to commit more of them. I'm just saying. All right, so I think if WizKids did a couple of things, it would help them on also, like, getting good mechanics out temporarily and evaluating them, and then bringing in new mechanics. I think the first thing they need to do is take your current base of testers and double it by 2 at minimum. Okay. I believe that you should have probably like maybe a half a year in the can, and then start this new process, and then see what is being said, and then have it set up so that your new era begins right after retirement. Okay, right after retirement, that first set that's legal, right after retirement, you're like, boom, heroclix 3.0 in how we do things, or 5.9, whatever version y'all are on at this stage. We probably left 3.0 before we even got the special powers. So anyway, I think that's the first thing. I'm not saying that it all needs to be the elite of the elite of heroclix land. Hell, I'm not even saying that I need to be on there. But I do think that the amount of playtesters needs to double. Okay? And I also think, and this is just for me knowing secrets, your final versions need to be tested. Okay? All your final versions need to be tested. Don't do this BS where it's like, oh, we gave this to the testers. The testers gave us this feedback. We made this tweak, but we didn't send it back out to the testers. I think that's dumb. Because then you make that one tweak, and then you have a guy like Adam Friedman, and he says, grammatically, because of this, with this rule, and this inflection, and this tense, I can just win by playing 2 Groots and a War Machine. And they'll be like, what? How did... And then they'll go through it, and it's like, he's right! He can win by just playing 2 Groots and a War Machine. So I think that's it. I think that's the first thing that they need to do. The second thing that they need to do is they need to freaking have a path for the game. Like, if you're not going to make... You don't have to make it public. I'm not telling WizKids to do that. But get a freaking game plan. Okay? Like, knowing what sets you're going to try to put out. Like, even if it's just called Marvel Set 1, Marvel Set 2, Micro Set Turtles, DC Set, Marvel Set 3, Micro Marvel Set 1, Turtles, or Star Trek, or WWE, DC Set. Like, as long as you can do that, because I understand, like, I know them getting WWE wasn't something that they did in 6 months. Okay? It sure the hell wasn't something that they did in 6 months. This is something that they've had going for probably about 2 years now. Okay? And the design took them at least somewhere in the realm of 3 months to get their initial block, because they have to get all the characters approved and whatnot. And then from the design standpoint and getting it tested and whatnot, they probably had to spend another 2 to 3 months on that. Okay, so at least for them to get to this stage means that they finished their R&D probably, a year ago? Because it would be like a 6-month, like, getting it together, R&D, and then they have to send it over to China, and then China does it, and then you have to, you have your back catalog crap, and then China sends it over on the boat. And so that might take a month or 2 to come over here. Okay. I don't know about the month. Maybe a month, not 2 months. Okay. So it takes, a period of time. It comes over here. Bam. You drop it off and ship throughout the land. Okay. So this deal for WWE has been gone on over 2 years ago. All right. So at that stage, you're like, you have your roadmap, and then the knock on the door, Zoran comes in. He's like, guess what, guys? This wouldn't happen because this is too much energy for Zoran. Zoran comes in. He's like, guess what, guys? I got the WWE contract. Yes, I even got to handshake Vince McMahon when this all was done. Yeah. All right, so y'all get to work on it. All right, I'm out. I'm Zoran. Okay, again, way too much energy for Zoran. He'll never act like that. You know, this dude, like every time I see him, I think he's like the junior Jeff Bezos. Just look at him. He's like Jeff Bezos. You, he almost could be a body double for Jeff Bezos. Anyway, going on. The moment that happens, you got, okay, guys, we're going to be working on a WWE set. Here's our, you get your brainstorming happening. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, in our roadmap, this is going to be right about here. So what type of mechanics would we have to introduce? And what are we taking off the table that would mess with our roadmap? Or mess with our cycle plan? And then they'll talk and they'll figure it out. And they'll be like, well, we're introducing these mechanics. This doesn't necessarily fit with blankety blank. And we have a lot of immediate counters that are coming from that set. So let's fill it in. We'll table turtles. We're running out of stuff from there anyway. We'll table turtles. We'll put in WWE. It's going to have these unique mechanics. And then we'll just make sure that inside of the set, that it counters itself within the set. Boom. Tough acting to acting. That's all you got to do. Get rid of that fungus of overgrowth in your heroclix design process. That's all you have to do. Okay. If I hate to say it, if I can figure this out and I'm not a professional, how the heck can the professionals not figure some of this stuff out? Same thing. I mean, I got to be honest. This is actually what happened with objects. Remember when we had objects in resources and nobody was using objects, no matter how much we were yelling at WizKids that as efficient as resources were, and no one was going to pick objects over resources because of their exclusivity? So what did WizKids do? They took away the exclusivity later on, but they reevaluated objects. And they were like, okay, cool. We gave you a bunch of booty objects. All right, that's fine. All right, so what makes these objects good? These things. What's appropriate cost for that? Around here. We're going to spitball that. Okay, great. If we have a bunch of these things floating around, what does it do? And then the follow-up is it allows one character to be this thing. Great. That's a lot better than resources where we had resources buffing the whole team. So the whole team could do that thing. So let's do this because we're going to move into this other direction and we're moving away from organized play big events. Let's move towards objects. Objects work better. It's a lot easier to sell objects than complete resources because we'll lose money on that. Let's focus on objects. We can add in value into the booster, make people buy, and we'll make the objects have good abilities, but we'll also try to make them a little bit more cost appropriate while being cheap enough to be usable. And that's where we got Objects 2.0. Boom! It's that easy. It's literally that easy. Okay? So, like, part of the reason why we don't have these archetype changes, like I said, it goes back. It's WizKids. Like, WizKids is a factor in this. They're not doing some of the basic level stuff that is, like, industry standard. Now, you could say they're like the A team, and there's like 6 of them crammed in the office managing 5 properties and inventing new giblets all the time. And so, of course, creative energy runs low. And I would say yes, but I also think that's where you lean to your community. You have control. You have literally a controlled information platform that you only use to utilize rules off of. You don't do any polling. You don't ask any major questions. You don't ask for any direct feedback, nor do you have the ability to directly do healthy feedback with your community because your judges and everybody else in the forums are already burnt out. They're ready to say, like, this doesn't belong on the forums, more than willing to answer and help your question, unlike realms where you could get an opinion on what's going on and you could ask your question even if it showed up before at least some random guy trolling through the rolling through the rules forums will be like, links here, close thread. I can't even get that I literally can't even get that from WizKids. So I would come back and it's like you have a complete waste of materials and platforms and all the things to help make your game better, to help make your game more interesting. You can have everybody freaking sign what is it, a EULA every time that they log in. They agree to the EULA that all the stuff that they talk about is WizKids property. And you know what? You would have everybody off of Facebook and everyone would be on the WizKids forum 24/7. You will kill 2/3 of the Facebook groups overnight, WizKids, if you did that. But again, I'm not WizKids. So go wrapping it all up. Am I was I a little too hard on my boy Patrick? I don't think so. I've been there. I lived through the freaking 10th anniversary Iron Man meta. I know how boring things can be. But real talk, you're talking about one of the best minds in the game. And he doesn't see a way of making things better or creating new archetypes of play. Then what I would say is, one, sucks to be retired, and two, get back in the game. Like, I would hate to face Patrick. I know this is like poking the lion. I know it's poking the lion so bad. But real talk, if Patrick came back into the game and was able to compete, and I know he says it's not worth it because of prizing, I understand that. But he came back into the game, I'm betting you so many people would be afraid. So many people would be afraid of him coming back into the game and all the different types of innovation that he would provide. But the only way he's going to get the level of innovation that he wants is either to hurt his own business, make everybody dumb, or take over WizKids. And it's not going to happen. So the only realistic option is for he himself, to go out there and either create a hit list or do it or make the original tech. And I think I think those last two options are completely viable in his wheelhouse. I've tried to make original tech for years, being for a period of time the only builder in Phoenix Nest, and I realized I couldn't do that, and I recruited builders. Right now, I'm just like the icing guy. Like, everybody else builds the cake, I'm up there putting the roses and stuff on there, laying the fondant and crap. I'm like, maybe we want to add this thing. Oh, that little thing worked. Oh, great. Oh, good. You're still sort of useful, Edward. Yeah, I know. I'll put that little rose right there. Being a freaking, like, not Bob Ross. What the heck is that one dude's name? The Afro white dude. Anyway, I forgot his name. Anyway, so, yeah. I helped paint a little happy little tree over there after they done most of the work. That's what it's like for me being on Phoenix Nest. I still have my original tech. I still have stuff I take to locals. But for most of the like nationals and world stuff, I help, but I don't do all the legwork anymore. So anyway, that's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I am going to have the set review out probably tomorrow. So you're going to get this when I upload it. And then probably the next day is going to be the set review. Okay, so bear with me on that. Just be a little bit patient. Just a little bit patient. So you can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me of the sad story of planet Ellipsis Sigma, in which their AI and the creatures' bodies started to merge, where the AI actually, once biologically implanted, took over the personalities and mindsets of the creatures, and now sort of like some weird mold moss to ants. They are the Borg. They are just like the Borg. It's a sad warning tale. So sad. But yeah, so follow me on Twitter because YouTube hates YouTubers like me. Not because of my, well, maybe because of my political beliefs, but primarily because I'm small. And they don't want to promote my videos. So you won't always see when a new video is up. I know I'm subscribed to Happy Little heroclix, and I don't get most of the notifications when the stuff he puts up goes up. So yeah. So definitely follow me on Twitter because for some reason YouTube will send it immediately out on Twitter when I have something go up. So follow me on Twitter. If you want to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and all the other jazz, like you hear every other YouTuber say, you could do that. But meh, you know, it is what it is. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. The startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Let me know. Am I wrong? Am I wrong in my assessment about all this? I'm willing to be wrong. But I do think unknowingly Patrick did sort of open up a full episode to me. So there you go. But thank you, Patrick. We're still cool. Hopefully after this. But yeah. Am I wrong in my assessment that the only way to make things more interesting is to make people stupid? Yeah, you can also donate to the show at startingoverpodcast at you can donate to the show at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com, and on there is a donate button. And last but not least, if you want a t-shirt, there is a link below for Starting Over Podcast t-shirt. Woo! All right, that's it. It's a lot to do. It's hot. It's humid. It goes from 80 degrees to flash flood and 30 degrees with the quickness in Kansas City right now. So, yeah. All right. I'd like to thank you all for listening. And remember, we all have to